Okay, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about myself. I'm also not going to spend a lot of time talking about technology. So if you came to learn about antivirus and VPNs and Microsoft 365, love to chat with you about all that stuff, but maybe another time, another place. David stole so much of my content, but I think it's important to recognize that how you perceive risk really makes a difference on how you approach it. So I'm Jesse Hill. I'm the president of Tier 3 IT Solutions. We work with many organizations, nonprofits, and for-profit businesses to help them manage technology as it relates to achieving business or organizational outcomes. Again, that's all I'll say about that. If you want to chat with me later, would love to connect. So obviously, I open up with what is risk? And the reason I started with this slide is because I recently read a book that made me think about it a little bit differently. I also was out skiing with my family last weekend and really thinking about how the different members of my family make their way down a ski slope. And you know, he already touched on so many of these things. It is the possibility of something bad happening. It's the possibility of missing out on something. Your perspective of risk changes dramatically depending on where you're at in your life. You know, as I'm going down the mountain, I'm starting to think a little bit more about what happens if I'm in, you know, a full body cast today, as I have, you know, a family and employees that depend on me, than when I was 20. And I'm probably going to look at it a little bit different 10, 15 years from now. He already touched on many of these, and the one that I have that we didn't really talk too much about is risk as an opportunity. And I really see this a lot in our business, in our industry, because things just change so fast. So we're going a little bit with the skiing theme here, and for those of you who don't know, this is Jackson Hole, a pretty famous ski resort down in the US. And this part that's circled is a very famous part. It's called Corbett's Couloir. And they now do an annual competition there called the King and Queen of Corbett's. And there's videos of the first, or photos of the first people going down it, and I mean, they're terrified. But as people have explored this, as equipment and technique and skill level has changed, the perspective of risk of skiing down this particular slope has also changed quite dramatically. So I mentioned a little bit the idea that your perception of risk is different depending if you're learning to ski and are used to riding up, you know, the little moving tracks. Maybe you're the doctor that sees the aftermath of risk. If you had a family member that said, "Oh, I'm gonna go do this thing," you'd be like, "Well, you know, I treat people from incidents they've had there all the time." But maybe you're that guy, and you go, "Holy man, the risk isn't getting hurt. The risk is not being legendary," right? And so go and search it. You will see videos of people doing absolute insane backflip, twist, whatever's into here. And, you know, where 20 years ago, this was, you know, an almost unskiable piece of terrain. So how does this relate to, you know, us in organizations? And again, we already talked about many of these. You know, risk is about missing out. And I think in technology, this is, you know, AI is one of the things that we really need to think about as organizations. I mentioned, or he mentioned, we've been serving other businesses and organizations since 1990 when it comes to computing. And sometimes I feel like we've been doing it forever. And then I realized that computing technology has really only existed for the individuals and the businesses for 35 years. Can anybody in this room foresee any point in human future where we don't have technology as part of our daily lives? And I think we can all say, no, these computers are here to stay. They're only going to get bigger and better and faster, which means we are at the absolute infancy of what technology is going to do in our lives and in our organizations. So I was trying to think of an example of what it means to miss out on an opportunity. And I remember a presentation I went to where they were talking about harvesting ice. Because it used to be that, the food that you produced or harvested would go bad. And so how do you stop that from happening? Well, you keep it cold. Well, in the before 1815, there was no way to do that. So they harvested ice, they shipped it around the world. The demand exploded in the late 1800s. And then around the mid-1930s, I think it was General Electric was one of the first ones, they started making these ice boxes that you could put in your house. And the ice extracting industry started to nosedive until, eventually we all stand here and go, sorry, you're telling me that you would cut ice out of a lake and ship it to someone and they would put food on it in a box? The people that were running ice harvesting businesses thought that people wanted ice. But they didn't want ice. They wanted to keep their food fresh. They wanted to do it in a simple, efficient, easy way. So when we think about AI and we think about technology and the way that it's developing, are we ice harvesters or are we technology adopters? So technology risk comes from a lot of different places. I think he touched on it. The truth is, the number one risk that you have in your organizations from technology is people. It's people, it's their habits, it's poor passwords, poor password hygiene. We talk about this all the time. It's the tools that we choose, the cloud services that we use. We have a term in our industry called shadow IT. What this means is that you have no policy about AI right now. How many of your people are using an AI platform that you have not vetted or outright permitted or denied? Even if you do have a policy about AI, there are platforms that people will use that you may not have endorsed. Our data, you have lots of personal information about your employees, your volunteers, the people that you serve. Our lack of knowledge, and I think this plays into what we just heard, indecision and inaction. When we don't make decisions, when we don't take actions, we end up exposing ourselves for a longer period of time than maybe we need to. Now, we have to be thoughtful and considerate when we adopt any new technology or policy, but ultimately, as he said, if you choose not to choose, you are choosing. The impacts of a cyber incident, we already heard about it a little bit. I mean, it really does depend. Let's keep in mind that the definition of a cyber incident can really vary quite widely. We often think about this idea of someone hacked us. Well, sure, that is a cyber incident. A cyber incident is also when a member of your staff shares information with someone that they shouldn't have. So when they reply all and attach a spreadsheet with all of your employees, personal information. That's a cyber incident. Would a antivirus or a VPN or a different cloud service have stopped that? No. Now, there's massively different impacts depending on the type and the scope. Organized crime has moved into cybercrime. I mean, you can read about all of these basically scam factories over in Malaysia and Thailand and South America, and they're using AI. I was on a call with one of my peer members yesterday, and he was showing me a platform that he's subscribed to. It's going to cost him $500 US a month, and it is essentially a robocall platform that he's using to set appointments with potential prospects for his business. So he's spent the last 3 months training this particular bot, and when it phones you, you would have no idea that it is a computer. It even puts in ums and pauses and stutters a little bit on some of the words to make it sound more human and more realistic. He has a maximum, though. He can only dial 1,600 numbers per minute.
Per minute?
So if you think that a for-profit business is, leveraging a tool like this, what do you think is going to happen with the criminal enterprises? We've talked about a couple of these other things. When we have a cyber incident, it not only impacts your bank account and your finances, it affects your relationships and your reputation. It could affect your ability to, get a future grant. It could affect your ability to partner with another organization. And so we really want to think about not just the financial impacts, but how it kind of works its way down the line. I've got one on here about affecting employee morale. We have in our business, of course, worked with many organizations that are going through difficult incidences. It is incredibly stressful. And there's a lot of uncertainty, and they don't know how they're going to come out of it and what kind of effects are going to come from it. And then, of course, we're going to hear about how it affects your insurance and compliance. And the reality is that in Canada, the highest bar that most organizations have to meet for compliance is from their insurance provider. Even organizations in healthcare, I mean, I hate to say it, and he could attest, but I think I'd be overestimating if I said that only 10% of healthcare facilities that I visit are compliant with the Health Information Act. Because there's hundreds of little check marks that they need to be looking at in order to meet those needs. And then the remediation. So the thing that I talk about, and I love this, is that cybersecurity is not a product you install. It is a practice you instill. So yes, buying good products, having the right solutions, all the bits and pieces are important. But more important, and the reason it's important to have people like you in the room, is that it's about building a culture of awareness and involvement in the cybersecurity journey. Cybersecurity is not a destination. You will never be cyber secure. But you can be more secure than your peers if you continuously review and adapt and invest in your processes and your procedures and your people. So, obviously I said I'm not going to talk about the techie stuff, but I am going to share with you a couple of frameworks because I think it's really important when we think about cybersecurity. It's this big, complicated, easy to get lost in mess of standards and tools and processes and all those types of things. So there's really smart people at the National Institute of Science and Technology down in the US who have developed this cybersecurity framework. And it breaks it down into different chunks. Now, the first part that we just heard about is governance. And the governance oversees the entire process. This is about making sure you have policies and procedures and training and involvement from your people in the whole cybersecurity process. We then recognize that in order to secure something, you first need to know what you have. So identify, what do we have, where is it, what information is in it, all the things that we just heard about. We then go into a phase called protect. Once we know what we have, we can start to design an appropriate level of protections. I a lot of times use analogies, so it's like saying, if my house was my technology and I needed to secure my house, well, the first thing I need to know is, where is my house located? Who are my neighbors? What does my lighting look like outside? How many windows and doors do I have? Okay, once I've identified that, now I can move into what improvements do I need to make? So that's the protect phase. I want to point out that this is the proactive component of managing our cybersecurity. We then move into the center, which is called detect. And I call this kind of like having the alarm system. So detect is about making sure we know what's happening in our technology when something that isn't supposed to happen triggers an alert so that we can investigate it. In our industry, we often we look at this chart, and to the left of detect, we call it left of boom. To the right, it's called right of boom, because when something goes boom, it's bad. So to the right, we're talking about how do we respond to an incident. We asked about some policies. Has anybody ever run a cyber incident simulation? So a cyber incident simulation is one of the most valuable things you can do with your team. You get your leadership in a room and you say, all right, everybody, imagine this. It's Monday. You've just gotten an email from one of your funding partners saying, hey, just wanted to confirm you got that $1.5 million we sent to you last week. And you're going, nope. Okay, we have a problem. What do we do? Or all of your computers have popped up with a lock screen on them, a ransom. So how do you respond to an incident? And then the last is how do you recover? Because again, from the insurance perspective, we need to manage both of those. So these are the reactive incident response components. And so as an organization, when you're thinking about improving your cybersecurity, what I recommend, start on the left and work your way to the right. The other tool that you can use, and again, I'm happy to share this information with you, there's a thing called the CIS Controls. And you probably can't see it, but there are 18 categories of technology controls that you can implement to help improve your state of cybersecurity. Inside these 18 categories, there's a total of, I think it's 165 individual controls. Now, the thing about it is that they've broken them up into different levels. So everybody should strive to be at a minimum what they call implementation group 1. This is just saying, hey, if we don't want bad people in our house, we need doors and windows. Level 2 is, okay, we need to have locks with keys. Level 3 is we need to have cameras and alarms and trained dogs and whatever else we're going to do. So again, cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination. So if you're not doing any of these things yet, you get in there and you say, all right, what do we have to do to get to level 1? Can we do that by the end of this year? And when we talk insurance, most of the questions that you get on your cyber insurance application tie back to this. Oh, look, we've seen this chart before, so I'm not going to go into it a whole lot, but it's what we just talked about. Cyber risk is about understanding what is the impact and the probability of experiencing an incident, and red is bad, yellow is less bad, green is where we want to be. So when you go through the exercise of the cybersecurity framework and the CIS controls, start with the red things first. Those are your highest priority items and where you can make the biggest difference in the shortest amount of time. I did want to point out, because he brought it up, that my intro talked a lot about business. This is a list of organizations that we not only work with from a technology perspective, but that we support and make a fairly significant donation back to on a regular basis. Nonprofits have a special place in our heart, and serving our community is a big part of who we are as an organization. And I'm at time, so thanks everybody. We'll have time for questions, I think, after. Unless, does anybody have a question? Or do you want to wait till the end?
Do you have questions for Jesse? I'm good.
Because we're doing a panel afterwards as well.
The issue of shadow IT.
Yeah.
Okay, so IT is much more, it's cloud-based, kind of amorphous. There's all kinds of tools in the cloud that people can use to work around issues. They're less dependent upon your system, because usually there's other ways that they can address problems, but you don't have control of that. How do you even start to address that particular issue? I mean, you don't have control of it, right?
So the question is what I call the shadow IT. So shadow IT is anybody using a site or service or software or tool that you have not dictated for them to use. The way I always describe this is I say, imagine you came in and you had in the boardroom 10 new laptops, and in the parking lot you had 10 new trucks. Because everybody's getting new trucks and new laptops today. Which of those has more policies around them? My bet is that your trucks, you have something that says you can't drink and drive. You have something that says you can't use it on the weekend to tow your trailer. You have something that says you can't use it at lunchtime to go pick up your friend's couch and move it across town, because what happens if the couch falls on the guy and breaks his leg? Who's liable for that? Now, the thing about this analogy is that if somebody does something they're not supposed to with one of your trucks and they run it into a ditch, you lose one truck. If somebody installs an application that is free because it's piggybacking other malicious software, you have the potential to take out your entire fleet of technology. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to have a policy that says, these are the things that you're allowed to do with your computer. If it's not on this list, consider it a no. Come and talk to us. The second thing that you need to do is you need to talk to people, and you need to have an open communication where you say, if you need to do something that's not on this list, can you please make sure that you come and talk to us, because we need to understand what the roadblocks are for you to accomplish the work that you're doing, so that we can come up with a plan to help you solve that. Now, those are the first two things. The next part is you have to decide how much monitoring and those types of things you want to mix into it. But I think it starts with having good policies. Good question. And we'll wrap up at the end with any more that you have. So thanks, everybody.